Welcome back to my channel, everyone. If you are new here, welcome, and I genuinely mean it when I say you picked the perfect video to start with, because what we are covering today is one of the most moving, most surprising, and most deeply human stories that has come out of the BTS universe in a very long time. This is not about a chart record. It is not about a music video or a concert moment or a viral clip. This is about what happens in rooms that the public is never supposed to see. Rooms where real decisions are made about real careers, where the future of someone's artistic identity hangs in the balance, and where the people who love that artist decide what kind of loyalty actually looks like when it costs something. This is the story of RM and Jungkook, and a conversation with label executives that nobody outside of that room knew existed until Rolling Stone published their cover story on April 13, 2026, and RM decided to tell the truth about what he did. So get comfortable. Because this one is going to take you somewhere, and I promise you it is worth every second. Let's begin at the beginning. Because to fully understand the weight of what RM did and what it meant, you need to understand the specific moment in history when it happened and exactly what was at stake. The year was 2023. BTS as a full group was on hiatus. Every member was completing their mandatory military service in South Korea, with the full group comeback still a couple of years away. In that space, in that strange, suspended period when ARMY was waiting and the members were each navigating their own solo paths for the first time, Jungkook was preparing to do something he had never done before. He was preparing to introduce himself to the world not as the youngest member of BTS, not as the Golden Magne, not as 1/7 of the most successful group in K-pop history, but as himself. As a solo artist. As Park Jungkook, standing alone on a stage he had built for no one but himself. And the song he chose to make that introduction with was not a safe song. It was not a polished, carefully constructed, universally palatable piece of music designed to offend nobody and appeal to everyone. It was bold. It was confident. It was adult in a way that nothing associated with Jungkook had publicly been before. The song was called 7, and it was produced by Andrew Watt in Circuit, the same Andrew Watt who has won Grammy Awards and produced records for some of the biggest names in Western rock and pop, and it featured American rapper Latto. The genre was UK garage infused with contemporary pop. The target was the mainstream American and global market. And the lyrics, in the explicit version, were exactly what the title suggests: mature, direct, sensual, and completely unambiguous about what Jungkook was expressing. There was a line in the explicit version that made it crystal clear this was not the same soft, boyish image that the world had projected onto him for a decade. And when those lyrics landed on the desks of executives at HYBE, the response from some of those higher-ups was apparently one of concern. Of hesitation. Of the kind of institutional nervousness that large entertainment companies get when one of their most visible artists is about to do something that departs significantly from the image that has been carefully built and maintained over years. This is important context. HYBE is not a small company. It is one of the most powerful entertainment conglomerates in South Korea and increasingly one of the most significant music companies in the entire world. Its fortunes, as Rolling Stone noted in their cover story, are so closely tied to BTS that even slight shifts in the group's perceived trajectory can move HYBE's stock price. The executives at HYBE are not careless people. They are experienced industry professionals who understand what BTS means to the company and who have built careers around managing the relationship between the group's enormous global brand and the decisions that are made about how that brand evolves. So when some of those executives flagged the explicit lyrics on 7 as a potential concern, they were not doing so out of pettiness or ignorance. They were doing so out of a particular kind of institutional caution that is entirely understandable, even if it is, ultimately, exactly the kind of caution that can suffocate an artist's ability to grow. And this is where RM enters the story. Kim Namjoon, BTS's leader. The person who, more than any other single member, has been the intellectual and artistic conscience of the group since its earliest days. The person who in interviews routinely quotes Rainer Maria Rilke and Tyler the Creator in the same breath, who during his own military service lay awake in his bunk listening to Dijon and Don Toliver in Playboy Cardi while composing ideas in his head, who has described the process of making Ararang as simultaneously the most confusing and the most necessary thing he has done in his career. RM is not someone who acts without thinking. He is not someone who makes noise for the sake of making noise. Every word he says in a public forum, every position he takes, every piece of his own vulnerability that he shares, all of it is deliberate. So when he chose, in a conversation with Rolling Stone in 2026, to tell the world what he did for Jungkook in 2023, that choice was itself deliberate. He wanted this to be known. He wanted the record to reflect what actually happened. And what actually happened is this. RM went to the label. He walked into that conversation with HYB executives, with the full weight of his position as BTS's leader and as one of the founding architects of everything HYBE has become, and he said the words that Rolling Stone published verbatim in their April 13th cover story. He said, "I told the label, please don't change." And his explanation was the kind of simple, disarming, completely unanswerable logic that only RM could deploy in that situation. Why not? He's all grown up. He can sing an F-word. That is the quote. That is the argument. That is RM, standing in a room full of people who control the machinery of one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world, and saying, with absolute clarity and absolute conviction, that his younger brother is a grown adult who has the right to express himself in his own music without having to sand down the edges to make corporate decision-makers feel more comfortable. I want you to sit with that for a moment and really feel the weight of it. Because this is not RM going to bat for himself. This is not him protecting his own creative output. This is him using his position, his relationships, his institutional standing, all of it accumulated over more than a decade of being BTS's leader, to stand in the way of something that could have diminished Jungkook's artistic identity before it ever had a chance to fully emerge. That is what leadership looks like in practice. Not speeches. Not inspirational captions. Leadership is walking into an uncomfortable room and saying something that needs to be said on behalf of someone who, in that particular moment, needs an advocate. And RM was that advocate for Jungkook without being asked, without publicizing it, without making it about himself, and the world only found out because he chose to mention it 3 years later in a magazine interview. Now let's talk about Jungkook's side of this story, because his perspective on what happened is equally revealing. When asked by Rolling Stone about the explicit lyrics on 7, about whether he felt any discomfort, any anxiety, any second-guessing about releasing something so far removed from the image the world had of him, Jungkook's answer was so specific and so perfectly him that it almost takes your breath away. He said, "I wasn't embarrassed. I just felt, so what?" 4 words. So what? No apology. No elaborate justification. No defensive explanation about what he was trying to achieve or what message he was trying to send. Just a completely calm, completely grounded, completely adult acceptance of his own choices. I am a grown man. I made a song I believe in. So what? That is Jungkook in 2023. That is who he had become while the world was still, in many ways, holding on to an older version of him. And then he said something else in the same Rolling Stone piece that gets at something even deeper. He described working on 7 as the most important and special moment of his solo career to that point. He talked about being in a period of creative limbo before the song came along, a period when nothing was clicking, when the task of building a solo identity after a decade of group work felt like a puzzle he could not solve, when everything felt like, in his own words, a hassle. And then 7 appeared. And he heard it. And something unlocked. He said, 7 made me want to get back to it. That song did not just become a chart record. It was the moment Jungkook found his footing as a solo artist. It was the door opening. And the only reason that door opened the way it did, with all of its honesty intact, with the explicit version that reflected exactly who Jungkook was at that point in his life, is because RM walked into a room and made sure nobody changed what was behind it. There is a phrase Rolling Stone used in their earlier Jungkook cover story that I keep coming back to when I think about what 7 represented. They described it as Jungkook shedding the myth of innocence. That phrase deserves unpacking because it is more than a clever line. The myth of innocence is something that forms around certain artists, especially young artists, especially the youngest members of boy groups, especially in industries like K-pop where image is constructed and curated and where specific emotional roles get assigned to members early and then calcify over time. Jungkook came into BTS as a teenager. He grew up in public. ARMY watched him develop from a shy, gifted kid from Busan into one of the most technically accomplished and emotionally compelling performers of his generation. And somewhere in that process of watching him grow, a particular version of him became fixed in the public imagination. A version that was beautiful and talented and endearing, but also somehow perpetually young, perpetually innocent, perpetually safe. The myth of innocence. 7 was not a rejection of BTS or a rejection of ARMY or a rejection of the love that had surrounded him throughout his career. It was simply Jungkook saying, the person you built this myth around has grown up. He has real feelings, real experiences, real desires. And he is going to sing about them in his own voice. That is not a betrayal. That is an artist becoming fully himself. And RM understood that completely. Which is exactly why he fought for it. Now let's look at what the song became after RM successfully made that argument. Because the vindication of his position is not just moral or emotional. It is also empirical, and it is overwhelming. 7 debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, the second solo K-pop song to ever achieve that, following Jimin's Like Crazy earlier that same year. It entered Spotify's daily top song global chart at #1 on its very first day of release, making Jungkook the first artist aside from Taylor Swift to surpass 15 million first-day streams on the platform. It went on to become Spotify's fourth most streamed song of the entire year 2023. The explicit version, the one that made some executives nervous, the one that RM stood in a room and defended, is the version that people played over and over again. It is the version that introduced a genuinely mainstream global audience to Jungkook as a solo act. It is the version that made critics and industry observers start writing about him in language they had never used for a K-pop solo artist before. Words like extraordinary. Words like soulful. Words like built for pop. And the momentum that 7 created did not stop there. It led directly to the Golden Album, released in November 2023, which featured collaborations with Ed Sheeran, Shawn Mendes, Andrew Watt, Major Lazer, DJ Snake, Jack Harlow, and Latto. That album has since accumulated more than 6 billion streams on Spotify. It led to Jungkook being named the biggest K-pop musician in America on the inaugural Billboard K-pop Artist 100 list. It led to ELLE Japan declaring him a true pop star whose existence has transcended the boundaries of K-pop entirely. It led to Qatar Tourism's chairman referencing him as central to their cultural strategy. It led to Rolling Stone ranking him among the 200 greatest singers of all time. It led, in no small part, to the full BTS comeback in 2026 arriving with such extraordinary momentum, because Jungkook came out of his solo era as a globally established pop star in his own right, not just as a member returning from hiatus. Every single piece of that chain traces back to a song that almost got changed. That almost got sanitized. That almost had its edges smoothed down until it became something less honest, less bold, and less true to who Jungkook actually is. And RM knew. He heard the song. He understood what it was. He understood what it could do and what it would mean for the person who made it. And he made sure nobody took that away. There is one more thing worth saying about why RM chose to share this story in the Rolling Stone cover story specifically, and why the timing matters. BTS in 2026 is at a genuinely different point in their relationship with HYB and with the music industry than they were in 2023. They have just completed the biggest comeback in Korean music history. Arirang debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 with the largest first-week sales figures ever recorded by a group. Swim became their 7th #1 on the Hot 100. The Arirang World Tour is the largest ever mounted by a South Korean act. They are not a group that needs to prove anything or demonstrate anything or manage anyone's perception carefully right now. They are at the top. And from the top, RM looked back and decided to share a moment from the climb. A moment when the outcome was not certain. A moment when someone needed to be protected and he was the one who showed up to do it. That is not accident. That is RM being exactly who he has always been, as someone who believes that the truth of how things happen matters, that the people who made something possible deserve to have their stories told, and that the bonds forged in difficult moments are the ones worth preserving in the record. He told that story for Jungkook. So that ARMY, and the world, would know that 7, the song that launched one of the most extraordinary solo careers in K-pop history, arrived in its fullest, truest, most honest form because someone loved the person who made it enough to stand in a room full of corporate power and say no. Do not change this. He is grown. Let him be who he is. ARMY has always known that the bonds inside BTS run deep. You have felt it in the music, in the concerts, in the thousands of small moments caught on camera over a decade and a half of shared life. But knowing it in your heart and having it confirmed in the pages of Rolling Stone by the person who lived it are two different things. And now you have both. You have always known RM would do anything for his members. Now you know that he did. And the whole world has the receipts. If this story moved you, if it made you go back and listen to 7 with completely different ears, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel so you never miss a video, and drop a comment below telling me how you feel about this right now. What does knowing this change for you? I want to hear from every single one of you. I read every comment. And I will see you in the next one. Purple Heart.